Welcome to Psychic Holistic Spotlight. I'm your host, Josie Way, and tonight we have two co-hosts, Ms. Sherry Kachanis and Mr. Bill Hannon. Our guest, I'm very pleased to have her here. Through wind, rain, and snow, we've been communicating. Comes from the Cape, and she is an astrologer of quite renown and highly intuitive. So that makes for a very interesting combination. Welcome.
Thank you, Josie. I'm delighted to be here.
So, what got you started, interested in astrology?
That's a very good question. I became interested in astrology when I was probably 16 years old. I don't know really, but somebody handed me a book on Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, which is a very good book on sun signs, and I got hooked. And then I had the good fortune to study with Isabel Hickey, who was the first astrologer to look at astrology from a spiritual perspective. And I studied with Isabel for several years. And it's a never-ending study. You never learn all of it. You keep going. So it's been over 30 years at this point.
I have a question. Isabel Hickey, was she local to Rhode Island, Newport area?
Actually, she was from Watertown, Massachusetts.
Okay. Because I recognize the name, and I thought it was somebody who was out in Newport, actually.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, okay, so I must have the wrong person in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody seems to know a tiny bit about astrology. They learn what their sun sign is.
Right.
And then they learn what their spouse's sun sign is to find out if they're compatible and how they can get along better.
Right.
You know, because astrology is wonderful. People are using it now, even in schools, to see how they can better teach children, how they learn, which ways they would learn better.
That's a really...
You know, instead of the batteries and series and batteries of tests,
Right.
knowing what their astrological signs are can tell you a great deal about the person.
Absolutely. It certainly can. Astrology, of course, is made up more than just the sun sign. The sun is the characteristic or the character nature of the person. Our survival instinct comes from the sun. But there are also 9 other planets operating within the birth chart that influence our personality, such as the moon, Venus, how we give and receive love, Mercury is our mind, Mars is our assertiveness. So all of those are taken into account when you read the birth chart, along with other energies. It is interesting, the sun signs are very important, and naturally, if you're of the same element, such as earth and earth would always blend better than, say, earth and water or something like that. So when you have sun sign astrology, you want to look at the elements for each sign to make sure they're compatible that way.
Isn't it true that I know I'm an Aquarius and my daughter's a Leo? Contrasting signs, the opposites, can get along very well together also.
Opposites can get along. For instance, you said you're a Taurus.
No, Aquarius.
Oh, you're an Aquarius, okay. So Aquarius, the opposite of Aquarius, would be Leo, right? And that your daughter is a Leo? Yeah, so that, yes, because opposites attract. So you always have that attraction with the opposite,
Right.
for sure. And, but if you have the same elements, such as if you're an Aquarius, other air signs, such as Libra and Gemini, would be best compatible with you, because those signs are all are mindy, kind of mental signs. Air is mental signs. So those 3 signs are more of mental abilities. Not that everyone doesn't have mental abilities, but those are the 3 kind of signatures for that.
Now, if you're both, for instance, Tauruses,
Right.
doesn't it make for a little too much of the same?
I think that sometimes it could be. Tauruses are considered to be stubborn and kind of, it's fixed energy, they call it fixed energy, so that you could kind of rub against each other in terms of that. But I feel that sometimes when you're with the same sun sign as yourself, there's compatibility because you understand the other person. You know, you might have the same interest, for instance. So that's where the same signs would be really be compatible with each other, because you'd have a lot of the same interests and probably view things in the same way, or go about, you know, plotting to do something in sort of the same manner.
You had mentioned the sun sign and the air sign. What other signs are there that come into play?
Fire signs, for example, would be Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Those are the 3 fire signs. The earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And the air signs I've already mentioned, and the others would be water, which is Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And so each energy really represents the different, like the water signs would be more emotional and more sensitive, where the earth signs are more interested in the material, you know, what material life and material gain and so forth. And the air signs are more mental, and the fire signs are energetic and exciting and ready to not sit around very much. They're very enthusiastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Isn't it typical that in the early years, it's hard to distinguish, even though you know when they were born, it's harder to distinguish the characteristics of a young, a young person, because, for instance, a Virgo child might be almost obsessive compulsive with neatness, or it could be the exact opposite.
Right.
They haven't learned the balance.
Exactly. Virgos usually are very shy as children as well, more introverted, and they kind of grow out of that as they develop. But usually your Virgos are shy when they're children, and they're very much detailed oriented, as you said, and very much about organizing and putting things in order and so forth. But if you go to a good astrologer and you have their birth time, place, and date, they can help you figure out ways to work with the energy to help the little Virgo along. I think the ones that I hear the most about are the Aries, because they have so much energy usually. The moms are usually running around like having a hard time keeping up with them, because that Aries energy is always about me first, getting my stuff done, and being very energized and lots of energy. They're usually very sportsy, as is Sagittarius. They usually are sports people. Our Aries and Sagittarius usually very sports oriented. Yeah.
I know a lot of Scorpios have a rough time growing up.
That's one of my favorite signs. And you'll always, kind of hear, I don't know why people are always saying bad things about Scorpios. I love Scorpios. First of all, they're phenomenal healers. And they're wonderful investigators and researchers, and detectives and police people are usually under the sign of Scorpio, because they like to delve in and find out what's under the surface with things. And I feel, in spiritual astrology at least, we look at Scorpio, which is ruled by the sign of Pluto, and we know that Scorpion people usually come into this lifetime to transform. So in some time or some period of their life, there will be a major transformation. But I like Scorpios a lot, so all you Scorpios out there, you have a friend in me.
Yeah, the Native Americans liken the Scorpio to the snake, and particularly the transformation occurring with every transition they go through with the shedding of their skin.
Yes, exactly.
Through that ritualistic period that they go through.
Scorpios are also extremely powerful, but they're very quiet about their power. It's really kind of a behind-the-scenes energy, and they're kind of quiet about it, but very strong, have great endurance. And you're right, sometimes they go through heavier lessons than other people, but they have a lot of endurance, and they hang in there.
It sounds to me like, you're almost describing a Leo.
A Leo?
From my understanding of a Leo, at least, that's how I identify with myself.
Are you a Leo?
Yes.
A Leo is usually, there's a fire sign, and you're ruled by the sun. So Leo should really take the spotlight. They should be in the spotlight, and because they're ruled by the sun.
But I'm one of those people that like to step behind the scenes and watch how things unfold and
That's really not a Leo trait.
Okay.
But it could be your moon sign or your ascending sign. And because that would be, you could have a Scorpio ascendant or a Scorpio moon. So
I
you
see.
like to delve in and understand and get it. So
Right.
that's why the chart is made up of a lot of different energies we're working with and not just the sun.
okay.
But
Now, how
Leo
many?
should definitely take their place in the spotlight.
Okay. You had mentioned the chart, a life chart. What other, or a birth chart? What other charts are there?
The birth chart is the natal chart. So that's the chart of you have your time, place, and date of birth, and that's the exact moment of your first breath. That's called the natal chart. And then we have a progressed chart. And progressions are, as we start off as a Leo, but then as life progresses, you become more Virgonian. So you become more of a Virgo as your sun. It's called progression. So you look at the
move
energy and
around.
things move forward. They all the planets, the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, would progress to the next sign or the next 2 or 3 signs, depending on how they move. Then we have transits, and the transits are where the energy is today. So astronomically, wherever the energy is on this day and time, we would take that energy, the transit energy, and apply it to your natal birth chart, and that would give us a sense of where things were happening in your life today. Because the zodiac chart is made up of 12 what's called houses, and each house is a different aspect of your life. So the transit energy is really helpful to tell someone whether to. I had a gentleman come a few weeks ago, and he wants to start a business. So I looked at the chart and I gave him some dates when I felt would be really the best opportunity. And astrology does allow and give you that give you the real insight into other, parts
Right.
of your life where you can really pinpoint things.
I'm interested in one thing that I've never understood because I haven't gone to any of your classes yet.
You're
I
always
know what a
welcome.
moon sign is,
Yes,
but I don't really know what an ascendant is.
that's a very good question. The ascendant is the first breath you take. So the ascendant would be the first house in the chart. And remember I said there were 12 houses. So that would be the first house. And the ascendant is your physical appearance. And how when people very first meet you, who do they meet? They don't meet really you said Taurus, you were right?
No, Aquarius.
I'm sorry. They don't meet the Aquarius self. They meet whatever's on that first house with whatever's on that ascendant. It's kind of the mask we show the world. And then afterwards you get to know somebody and you say, oh, they really weren't the way. My first meeting of them, my first impression, that's kind of the ascendant. And the ascendant also is the first house. So it talks about how was your birth easy, was it hard, and what was your first time around, your first couple of years in life, what was that like? And it would be shown by the ascendant in the first house. It's a very important placement in the chart.
So it's kind of your inner child. It tells about the inner child.
Yeah, it could tell about the inner child. That's a good analogy, yes, definitely.
You brought a chart with you. I don't know if they can focus on it with the cameras. I didn't ask them to do that
Well,
before.
maybe if Shirley holds it. Oh, you hold it up.
I'll hold it up and see if you can focus in on this.
Kind of teeny.
Right, maybe.
It might be too small.
No, one of the camera people can probably. I don't know. But all right, so it looks to me like there's some sacred geometry in the center of that.
There's a lot.
It's the connections.
The blues are the trine aspects. The reds are the squares and oppositions, and we mathematically chart the differences between the planetary energy
Okay.
to see how the energy moves together.
Now I see that that's today's date on the
It
upper
is.
upper left hand. So
Yes, it is.
So what is that telling us about?
Is this a
today?
transit?
This is the transit chart, so it's for this time. I set it for 5 p.m. today for Providence, Rhode Island. So this has got if we started at 5, we'd have a Scorpio ascendant. So we're uncovering, aren't we? We're uncovering something mysterious, which is astrology. And one of the things that's been going on for all of us recently is something called a grand square. And that's all the red You see the big square there in the middle, the red?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is really affecting everyone, really. And it's a grand square is when the energy kind of gets caught up, so there's not a lot of movement. People get very frustrated. Restricted and frustrated. So we have Saturn, for example, squaring, let's see, Saturn is squaring, I'm sorry, I can't see that well, the Capricorn energy down here. So sometimes what happens is that the energy gets blocked and you don't get that free movement. So people have been very frustrated recently, and you've seen a lot of, like car accidents and people road raging and so forth. That would be that Mars-Saturn energy.
Would you say that people are feeling stuck?
I think they're stuck, yes.
You know,
Yep.
that's been sort of the theme that I've heard recently is that people come to me and they're like, I feel stuck.
And the thing that I'm seeing with this is the Saturn is square the moon right now. So that would say that the Saturn energy has us emotionally stuck, and we feel like we can't get our words out or get our feelings out. But maybe it's time to go inward and work on the inner stuff. When you have a Saturn transit, oftentimes it's about going inward and seeing what's on the inside that you need to work on.
Yeah, what
Especially
kind of,
emotionally.
if there's any blocks, look at the ones that you might be able to do something about.
Exactly. Yes.
Or get the help from
Or
others.
get the help from others, absolutely. We also have Uranus and Mars opposing each other right now. And Uranus is this wonderful, I always call it like a computer download of information right into your brain.
Wow.
So it's always something eccentric and unusual with Uranus. And it's usually chaos or the energy is all over the place, so you can't really control what's going on. And the Mars energy is about aggression and assertion. So when you have those in opposition, it can be a little dangerous for all of us. So you have people wanting to try to balance with Mars and Libra, and the Uranian energy is about being assertive and going out and getting what you want because it's in the sign of Aries. So there's a lot of that imbalance right now, and it has been going on since March. There's been this imbalance with these energies since March.
And how long will how long will that continue?
Well, this is going to go off and on because the planets go forward and sometimes they retrograde. So this is going to go on and off probably for about 2 more months. The Uranus itself, that planet stays in a zodiac and a sign for 7 years.
Okay.
So we usually have a 7-year cycle
Okay.
of Uranus. And right now it's in Aries, so it's a lot about the personal self, which is the Aries, but it's also about how are we using that energy to be assertive without being aggressive. So using our brain to be assertive and make changes, but not being aggressive with
That's
it.
right. I find that's a good balance to have.
Yes, definitely.
Right, especially when you're working with people.
Exactly.
Being able to sit back and listen to what they're sharing, and yet you can take a chart like this, and once you hear where they're coming from, intuit what this is telling you, and
Exactly.
give them a good reading.
What we try to do with astrology is, tell people where what's available for them. And it's really up to them to work with that energy, knowing that this is what's going on right now, and this is you may be stuck a little bit, but there's always a way out. You're never really stuck. You always have options. And that's the beauty of astrology. It'll tell you what's going on. For the business person, I don't do a lot of business consultations, but for this gentleman, I knew that he was going to do very well if he went into business around the end of July. It was a very prosperous time for him.
Now, you mentioned a word that some people may not know, and it's called retrograde.
Retrograde, right. We know that Mercury, everybody seems to know that Mercury retrogrades, and Mercury is the planet of communication. So Mercury retrogrades about 4 times a year, and it means that the planet seems to back up. It's not really backing up, but the energy kind of comes to a stabilized place, and then it turns a little. I think the Earth turns, and that's what it gets stuck. And what happens when we have Mercury retrograde is anything to do with computers, television stations, newspapers, anything to do with communication is usually going to have issues until Mercury goes direct again. And what I usually say to people is that just be aware of it and make your intention that you'll walk through that with the right attitude, because I feel like we bring a lot of our mentalness into that. But the other planets also retrograde, and that's why Uranus, for example, stays in a sign for 7 years. It's a 7-year cycle, because Uranus will go forward for 8 months maybe, and then go retrograde for a few months. And so that takes the process of a 7-year cycle. And that's why we have the 7-year itch and different things
Right.
in 7-year cycles.
Right. Well, it's also interesting. It seems like Mercury. It seems like it's not always in retrograde, but it's almost like you can tell when it is.
Right.
And it seems like, it happens frequently. I know it's a balance. I know it's a balance where there's positive and then when it goes into retrograde. But
Right.
it's always interesting to hear people communicate when things aren't going right. Mercury must be in retrograde.
And Mercury right now is in, and it depends on what sign it's in, and Mercury moves closely with the sun. So usually if the sun's in a particular sign, Mercury will be in that sign or the sign after, the sign before. Currently, Mercury is in Cancer. So when it goes retrograde sometime in July, then I would feel like household things, because Cancer rules the home, that watch out for household things breaking down, things like that. So if you look at the sign it's also in, and you think about when it goes retrograde, think about what the sign means, and if, for example, because Cancer is the home, that's where you may have problems with appliances and so forth.
Yeah, wouldn't you say it might not be the wisest time to, let's say, do construction work on
I would say
on
that,
your house
right, if it's
also?
retrograde.
Or
Exactly.
even making a big purchase
Right.
might, you need to be careful.
And it's always seemed that contract signing is something you shouldn't do. If you can avoid making a contract signing during Mercury retrograde, because things don't work out, or your car breaks down, you can't get things going with that. It's got to do with movement as well.
Yeah, everything might work out in the long run, but there may be a lot of frustrating delays.
Exactly.
What's the green dot in line?
The green dot that's called an inconjunct.
Okay.
So there's an adjustment to be made between the two planetary energies. And this is the moon in Leo. We have the moon in Leo. The moon moves every 2.5 days into another sign. So that's why sometimes you see people shift in their emotions throughout the week, throughout the month. They're never in the same emotional place usually. So, and it's in Pluto, so it's in conjunct Pluto. So it means that it's 150 degrees away, so it needs an adjustment. So between Pluto and the moon, there has to be adjustment right now. But that moon will move into Virgo in probably, today is Monday, probably by Wednesday. So we'll have a different kind of energy with that moon in Leo. And the moon in Virgo will be more emotionally practical when the moon goes into Virgo. But the moon in Leo is about expressing love and emotion, especially with children.
It's expansive, too.
Yes.
Well, it's also of interest. I recently became aware that this doesn't just pertain to people. This pertains to countries. It pertains
Exactly.
to companies that are born or brought into existence.
Absolutely.
Whenever they sign the corporate papers, that's when that company or country is born. Most people don't realize that the United States of America is a corporation.
I have the chart here for the United States of America I brought with me.
Whoa! Isn't that interesting? That looks
Yeah.
very different from the one from the
It's
person.
very different. Well, we're a sun sign. Our sun sign is Cancer, so we mother the world, of course, don't we? And our moon is Virgo, and which means that though we are emotional, we're critical with our emotions, and we're careful. We're kind of calculating. And we have a Libra ascendant, so we always want to balance everybody. But on the
I
other
was going to
side,
say, how can you say that's balanced when it looks like everything's on the left-hand side of the chart?
the balance is just referring to the Libra.
Oh,
but if you
okay.
look at the relationship chart, the relationship house, which is the 7th house, our relationships with other people or partners, we are the aggressor because we have Aries there.
It's
So we're very
ridiculous.
assertive. We're
Right.
we want to mother, but we want to control all the mothering. We want to be in charge of everything.
Right.
So we're assertive as well. So it's very interesting.
It is. It's very interesting. You look at what's happening in the world today and how
And
we
every
have
child-
something like 600 bases worldwide.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the reason for that? And here you go.
Oh,
it's showing
military
us-
bases.
Military
Military.
bases, right.
And we want to mother everybody. We want to nurture them and mother them.
Right.
But we also
Want to control
we
the
wanna
way they
control-
run their countries.
Once we do that, we want to control them. We can't let them go out on their own and just be push the, the birdie
No.
out of the nest. No, we
Right.
want to be there at the nest and telling them when they can fly.
Right, right.
So that's very pertinent here in
It
the
is,
chart.
it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I just became aware, like I said, about companies and then, corporations, and then I became
Exactly.
aware of the United
Exactly.
States being a corporation. And
Anything that has a birth date
yes,
and time.
right,
So that's why we can do the chart of the United States.
right.
Yeah. Is it possible to do someone's birth chart if they don't have the time? You can intuit some of it,
There
but
is-
not all of it.
That's a wonderful question. There is called chart rectification. It's very difficult to do because you really have to sit and talk with them and try to equate what time you thought they were born by different history that they give you. That's one way to do it. I like the intuitive way instead because the rectification is very difficult to do. Very hard. You really have to go through patterns and then say, okay, this could, because everything to set up the wheel, the time is really important, and that gives you where all the planets are.
All right, so this is very interesting what you're talking about right now. In other words, what you're saying is like if somebody's born at a specific time at a certain location on a certain date, what you're doing is you're more or less locking that person into, or you're not locking them into it. You're recognizing the energy that they were born into at that moment.
And longitudinal, latitudinally. Place is very important.
I see.
Yeah.
So I have some clients that grew up in Lebanon,
Okay,
and the time has always been iffy with them
sure.
because they didn't really record the time.
No,
And so we've gone back and forth a few times with what we feel, is as you would ask, we feel was the time. So there is another type of chart you can do if somebody doesn't have the time. And so what you do is make the sun sign, if they were Cancer, you'd make the Cancer on the ascendant as well. And that's called a solar chart. Solar chart. So you
Okay.
use the sun as the ascendant.
okay.
And that's pretty accurate, but it doesn't really give you the full, like if you look at your horoscope in the newspaper, that's what we call a sun chart.
Well, if everyone's been enjoying this, I want you to know we only have a few more minutes left, but I persuaded Patricia to come back.
Yes.
And you will see more of her. Now, I wanted to ask, if there's one thing we could learn from astrology, what would you say it would be?
I would say the one thing that you could learn from astrology is, and even with just your sun sign, to really look at and listen to yourself, listen to that inner voice, which is your sun sign. Because you came in with a certain character, and listen to what flows within you, what feels right for you, what doesn't feel right. And I think you can get a lot out of the sun sign by doing that. You can really understand and listen, really listen to your guidance that you get from that sun sign.
So you're saying this is a tool.
It's a wonderful tool. The tool.
So now, just to bounce off one tool with another tool, is numerology any connection? Can you pull the two together? And
I was going to actually do some research with somebody on that. We haven't gotten into it yet on a numerologist. Astrology is very different than numerology.
right, I understand that.
But they're
You
harmonious.
probably could. Yeah. Well, you're working with numbers
And energy.
and energy, exactly.
right.
And the energy, of course, with astrology comes from the energy of the planets, as we are
Okay,
and how the planetary energy affects us.
Right.
And everybody understands about the moon energy when the tides go in and the tides go out.
Sure.
And all of that. So think of all the other planets that also affect us in the same way.
Right.
It's okay.
No. Yes. So,
Shooting star.
Shooting stars.
so the reason why I
Planets.
asked that was I just read a quote from, I think it was Galileo, something about mathematics being the language of God
Absolutely.
in creating the universe. And so, it's, that's why I just figured I'd ask that.
Right.
Well, come back next time.
Okay.
Thank you for watching us on Psychic Holistic Spotlight.
Oh, perfect timing.